Meanwhile, at Manage Comics, coming to you from a secret underground lair, these dedicated heroes discuss the business of comics, industry news, comic book retail issues, and the latest developments from Manage Comics. They are promoters of comics, champions of small business, and four-color heroes. They are the Manage Comics team. Welcome to Meanwhile at Manage Comics. This is our brand new podcast and weekly video stream. That's right, weekly. So the Thoughtstream is officially dead. Meanwhile is now what's new and what's hot. Meanwhile has a lot of meaning for me personally. So if you'll remember back in the 80s, there were the Meanwhile columns that DC put out. And what I loved about this as a reader was this was always kind of behind the scenes stuff. And I've always kind of loved the behind the scenes about comics, the business of comics. So Meanwhile is going to be more focused on the business of comics. So folks at Challengers, I apologize. I'm totally stealing your bit. And, you know, Meanwhile also comes from the Super Friends. So one of the first voices that I learned to mimic when I was a kid was Ted Knight, who voiced over all the Super Friends things like, meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice, and meanwhile, deep in an underground lair. I love that stuff. So I learned how to do that. And so it's kind of a combination of the two. It's a little bit of DC's Meanwhile stuff. I mean, if you look at the logo, I straight up ripped it off. I'm pretty sure that the copyright's expired on that by now. But it's also going to be, you know, about the business of comics. And speaking of the business of comics, I got my data guy, what is it? Factotum. Ivan
with his trusty fat totem.
Meanwhile, in the data mines. And that's going to bring us off to our first segment. So we're going to do multiple segments. We'll talk about the data and, what goes on in the data mines. It's dark, it's grungy, and somebody's bound to get hurt. We're going to talk about industry news. We'll talk about what's up with Manage Comics, and then we're going to finish things off with next time on Meanwhile. So, Ivan, let's talk about some of the fun things that we've been struggling with lately.
Oh, what do you mean? Like where A and B covers cease to have any meaning when it comes to barcodes?
Yeah, let's talk about barcodes. So barcodes are a very interesting thing.
You had the graphic all lined up and ready to go.
Yeah, that's right. Barcodes are a really interesting thing with comics, in that there are the first, what is this, like 10, 11 digits? These all mean things. So the first little chunk here, 761941, that represents the company. And in this case, I'm pretty sure this is DC Comics. 34373, that would be a series identifier. So all Batman titles will have the same series identifier. All one-shots will have the same series identifier. So even if we've got 5 covers of a one-shot, they'll all share the same series identifier. And then these last 5 supplemental digits, Diamond introduced this in 2009, and they were really good about militantly kind of policing this. And they said that if you create a comic book series, you cannot distribute through Diamond without this supplemental 5 codes. So the first 3 digits represent a series, issue. In this case, this is Detective Comics 1027. So we omit the first one because 1,000 comics in 2009 didn't exist. So in a series. We have 1027. So it's 027. And then we have a 1, which represents the cover ID. So a 1 is an A cover, a 2 is a B cover, a 3 is a C cover, etc., etc. And then the final number is a printing. So 1 is a first printing, 2 is second, all the way up to 9. Neither one of these guys have a 0. There's no 0 identifier. Although technically there's no reason why you couldn't do a 0 for the 4th ID to represent 10 covers. So that brings us to, what do we do when we have 41 covers of Eternals #1? I always pick on Eternals because it's the only one that I remember the exact number of covers of. So
Although
what do we do when we have
any
40 some odd covers?
Vampirilla or Betty Page runs the risk of running into the.
Okay, but we're going to talk separately about what Boom and Dynamite do, which actually I think is really clever, and in today's market might be the thing that we recommend all publishers move towards. He said, smiling.
Hey, as long as it's standard, that's all I care about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
As long as everyone does it. Well, we too. We're going to do our own thing. You guys, you do your thing, and we'll all do them separately, and that way it's nice and unified.
And that's what I love about like legacy numbering. When they say Amazing Spider-Man is going back to legacy numbering, they don't change that 34373. They just change the number that's at the end. So, Amazing Spider-Man goes back to legacy numbering, still part of the same series code. So it's not really going back to legacy numbering. They're just showing something on the cover. But what's interesting is when Diamond starts announcing things as a cover, or sorry, DC announces a cover A, B, or a C. And in this case, we see a D.
And really quickly, the reason that's important is because the A, B, and typically C, but more importantly, the A and B are not ratio covers.
Correct.
They
shouldn't be.
Very rarely are they ratio covers. Yeah. But that's not necessarily true with a C sometimes and D and on.
Right.
And we only allow subscriptions for A and B, which is where the problem comes in.
Right. Exactly. And so one of the things that I've talked to Adam Freeman at Bad Idea, and he says, Brian, the data issues are your problem. They're not publishers' problems. They're purely your problem. You have to figure that out. And to that, I say, okay, my job, my only job, my core job, the thing that gets me up in the morning is selling more comics. I want to sell more comics. And I know a few things about human beings. And one of them, besides them being a cowardly and superstitious lot, is that they're also lazy. Humanity as a whole is an ambitious thing, but a person is a terribly lazy creature.
Well, I mean, I could get into my whole like neurological thing on laziness and how it's a requirement and not a fault. But
but the big thing is
the end result's the same. Yeah, paying attention to small details for extended amounts of time is not something that we're good at because it's not something that's ever kept us warm and fed in our millions of years of history. Well, sorry, 2,000 years history. Whatever.
Yeah, and the thing about comics is that I feel like a lot of publishers cater to the 20% and forget about the 80%. So the 80% just want comics, and they don't care, and they always want to get the A cover or the cover by their favorite artist. That might be the like I want the Peach Momoko cover of everything. But it's when we get into these okay, this month the B cover is going to be the cardstock cover, because there are people that are just like, what? I really like DC's cardstock covers. They're just nicer.
I had 2 customers who only wanted the cardstock of all the DC titles that they subscribed to.
Absolutely.
That's all they cared about.
And that's such a simple thing. DC has always made those B covers.
Mm-hmm.
Except last month, the B covers were all what is that called? The overlay covers.
It's not the cellophane, but
yeah, that's the word I wanted to use too. But anyway, they were the
celluloid
overlay cover things.
Yeah.
And then the C covers were the cardstock covers. Now, who do you think screwed that up? Is it the customer that says I always want a cardstock cover, or is the retailer who now has to go into 20 different customers and say, oh, for this month they want the C cover, but normally they want the B cover?
Yeah, I mean, my shop was small enough that I would have caught that if I was doing the ordering. But what if I was sick and one of my employees was doing the ordering and didn't know that, oh, James wants all the cardstock, so I need to change that to a C cover.
Exactly. So that's why I think that consistency is really important. And when DC says something like this one with a 6 at the end is the cover D. Like, I'm sorry, that's just a cover D cosplaying. It's a cover C, D, F. It's a cover F cosplaying as a cover D. So your cover F is actually this one that you've called cover D. Your cover E is actually the cover G.
Yeah. E should have sequence number 4.
Correct. Yeah.
That's I have it all mapped out in a notebook that I keep next to my desk.
And then, of course, when we get over 10, now we're having to hijack the printing. So this presupposes that there will never be a third printing of this title, which I think you should probably always start this at a 5. I think you're pretty safe to assume that there's not going to be more than a 5th printing of a comic these days. I know there are exceptions to the rules. Like, I think
it's not often you have a Stray Dogs type.
No, I was just thinking about 8 Billion Genies, which I think is in its 8th printing or something like that. But yeah, it's pretty darn rare. So if you were to start that at 5, I think you're pretty safe. But now you're presupposing that the third printings will have to have a 4 after them, I guess, which just confuses this whole numbering system. And at some point, like, why do we even have it? Now, you mentioned Boom and Dynamite. They actually do something a little bit clever where they say these first 2 numbers are going to represent the issue because we're probably never going to have a series go over 99 issues. And then these next 2 numbers are going to represent the variant because we are often going to have more than 10 variants. I think that's awesome. I think Marvel should do that, to be honest.
I mean, with the number of variants that they routinely put out, yeah.
Yeah. And then whenever they
number 1 variants they did back 3 years ago, but
yeah,
it was an obscene amount.
When they go over 99 issues, they would just start a new series. And to be honest, I can't think of a series in the last 10 years that Marvel has lasted longer than like 99 issues.
Yeah, they seem to be going in a completely different direction now with the way they number their series anyway. So
yeah, and they're relaunching every 6 months to 8 months, which, to be totally honest, I think that's fine. And we've actually built systems in so that stores can really easily subscribe their previous subscribers to the new series so they don't lose anything. Because a lot of people don't think that a jumping on point is also a jumping off point. Uncanny X-Men is the one that I always use. I bought Uncanny X-Men from issue 161. I bought Uncanny X-Men in years that I did not read an Uncanny X-Men. And I just purchased it all the time. And they canceled Uncanny X-Men in, like, I want to say 2014, 2015. And I've never bought an Uncanny X-Men since because my run is done. Actually, I sold my run after that too. But yeah, like, so a jumping on point can be a jumping off point too. So you got to keep that in mind. But again, we have tools in our system to help sell more comics. And that means if subscribers were subscribed to Uncanny X-Men, when the new Uncanny X-Men comes out, it's really simple for a store to clone them into that. So yeah, that's really all I want to say about this nonsense. And I hope that I'm going to Comics Pro, and this is a big one that I'm going to bring up, that we need to get this under control, because customers' expectation of what a D cover is going to be very different than what the UPC is indicating a D cover is.
And to be clear, and I think it's pretty obvious, but it should be said, this is a publisher issue alone right here.
Yep.
Because they assigned those. This is completely separate from a distributor putting the item code for a B cover of issue 2 as the A cover of issue 3.
Absolutely. Like the actual publisher determines what the UPC code is. So my theory is, in all the changeover that's happened in the last 5 years, the people that used to kind of be the traffic cops for that kind of thing are no longer at the companies. And so that's why we're starting to see this kind of stuff happen more and more. So this needs to be one of those policies that just gets ingrained into the company and in the company culture.
Yeah. Needs to be part of the style guide, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to add a reprint indicator to Manage Comics. Now, what's great is Lunar has been giving us reprint data in their actual Lunar file. So they'll tell us if something is a second or a third printing. So it says, printing 1 through whatever. which is great. So we'll definitely be adding that, which should mitigate some of the problems we're having with. In the past, nobody has ever included a series code in a second printing, and now everybody is. So second printings are showing up in our stuff, and we can fix that fairly easy. And then getting back to our data, we're also going to assign the second series of little numbers there, 34373, to our series code. So within Manage Comics and GeekFetch, we have our own series codes that we've created based off the different publishers' codes. We're also going to compare those to the UPC barcode series code to make sure that we're always getting everything absolutely right.
With the idea of eventually the UPC code being king.
Yeah, that's our goal, is that eventually I want the UPC, whatever's on the UPC, is the verbatim, data.
The item that we cannot change the facts of after it's been printed.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I think that's kind of our data mine stuff for the week. What were the fun data challenges of the week?
Just finding out that there was a chunk of stuff that was sent our way that had no sequence numbers at all.
Oh, I've got more for you.
There was a bunch of those. Hopefully we're going to have that tool set in place soon where I can hit a button and just be given a list of all of those.
Yeah.
And then was it Wildcats? Started with a W. There's a Marvel title that started with a W where they just decided to you know what? Screw convention. We're just going to use whatever numbers we want for the covers. That was fun. Well,
they've been doing that a lot lately. So like I've noticed a lot of B covers are now ratioed variants with Marvel.
But this wasn't even that. It's like cover E. Oh, we're going to give that a cover G sequence number, and who cares? And it's just all down the entire line of that one. It's like, great, thanks.
That's great. Well, let's talk some industry news.
All right.
Let's see if I can share my screen, and we'll talk a couple of fun little industry. Why can't it just be nice? There we go. So let's talk. We'll start out with the beat. Whatever happened to the sales charts? So sales charts used to be a big thing, and you would know kind of what the number one seller was. But now that there are multiple distributors and multiple, ways that these numbers can get in, Lunar, for example, doesn't provide sales numbers anymore. So right now, all the Comicron sales numbers that have been created lately are based off of 150 stores that use Comic Hub, and a kind of a tea leaf reading of the diamond charts. And I think that's giving just kind of weird data. And so none of this stuff really gets published super well. And what that also means is there's a bit of FOMO that's lacking. So used to be that people would know, okay, Batman's the number one selling book. I like to pick on it, but 8 Billion Genies sold as much as the third highest Marvel book, let's say, last month. So suddenly that would cause people to go, oh, what is 8 Billion Genies? So it was just another kind of tool that was used to sell comics. What did you think about sales charts?
Well, exactly like you said. The other problem is that I brought up yesterday when we were talking is there's already that 3-week FOC gap.
Yep.
And so if you're ordering books for your shop, if you have a small shop especially during the pandemic where you can't really afford to put a whole bunch of shelf copies up and have them costing you rent, you don't know if something's going to be hot, and you have to, maybe the people reading it aren't going to pick up onto it until issue 4, and that's, you've already placed your orders. Say they come in, they want issues 1 and 2, and you ordered 10 of issue 1 and you ordered 5 of issue 2 because no one signed up for it, and then like, well, where's the books? It's like, we don't have them. We can't order them. And so
Yeah, I think that's getting even worse
or they
because
get the trade. And now, because now it's like a 4 or 5 week.
yeah, and often you're getting, like, especially with Marvel stuff, you're ordering the 3rd and 4th issue before you've even had, like, a week's worth of sales on issue 1.
Never mind the Fortnite stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The other problem with that, and this might not even be the same discussion, so sorry if I'm taking the sideways, but what you're mentioning about the catering to the 20%, when new customers come in, parents come in wanting to get books, they completely get flustered and mad and never show up again when they find out, well, I came in, I ordered this issue before it came out. What do you mean I have to wait a month and a half for the reprint?
Yeah.
There's no other, I ordered this. I came in, it's coming out next week. I ordered it today. Why can't I get it?
Yeah. Yeah. So Heidi did a couple articles. She did one called "Whatever Happened to the Comic Sales Charts," and then she did another one that was called "More About Sales Charts." And on that one, she mentioned
the one from the podcast.
Sorry, what's that?
Was that the one where she went to the podcast?
No, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, that was a good one too. But she just mentioned that a lot of people tweeted, like Scott Snyder had said, "I missed the sales charts both because they could be aspirational and because they were part of a more central conversation. It felt like we were having about sales and excitement and energy and all of it in comics, and it feels very detached now." And I totally agree. I feel like there's a lot less urgency and excitement about upcoming comic projects because the one thing that kind of has always bothered me about the way that we do comic solicitations is this week, the new solicitations are going to start dropping. That data will not be available to us until Friday at the earliest. And by the time we massage it and make it all work properly, we're probably not going to get it up till Monday. We might be confident enough with it over the weekend to release it. The previews catalog and lunar catalog and everything drop into stores on next Wednesday. So now we're not only 3 months ahead of the products coming out, but we're a week before the catalog being released to a store where the store can start promoting those items. And then this whole cycle is going to begin again in 3 weeks. And meanwhile, products are arriving in stores 3 months later with little or no promotion. And by then it's too late anyway, because everybody has set their final numbers 3 weeks ahead of the product being distributed. So if these numbers started to get out earlier and people could see, sales velocity or purchase velocity before books even come out, you're going to sell more comics. Like, again, our goal at Manage Comics, let me be perfectly clear, is to sell more comics for comic stores. And the only thing comic publishers should be interested in is selling more comics. Like, that's your number one goal. I mean, okay, it's creating new IP that you can monetize into movies, but then your number 2 goal should be selling more products, right? So anything we can do that serves the master of selling more comics, we should do as an industry. And this is something I'm gonna really champion at Comics Pro. I think numbers need to get out there. I would like to actually start aggregating our numbers and knowing what people are ordering through Managed Comics, because we have all that information. We won't say that, Bob's Comic Burgers in Plainsview is ordering 25 copies of Batman, but knowing that Batman is the number one selling.
Having a heat map, though, can't hurt.
What's that?
Having a heat map can't hurt.
I talked to Travis, I think his name is, at SourcePoint, and he said that publishers knowing where, like, geographically where things were hot would help them to plan out things like comic conventions. And it may help them go to places they've never been before because they see that being in places actually moves the needle. And it may help them say, you know what, Michigan is oversaturated right now. I don't need to go to I think there's 3 or 4 different Michigan comic conventions. Do I need to go to all of them, or should I be, going to Ohio and kind of the places surrounding Michigan? I think that's super valuable, and I think that geographic representation would be huge, but that's something I think you would need a lot of buy-in by individual stores. Overall aggregate numbers are big enough that you don't have to get individual buy-in saying, is it okay if we use aggregate numbers? Because they don't mean anything if one store drops out or 100 stores drop out. So yeah, I'm definitely going to explore that with Managed Comics, and I've started some conversations with Heidi around how we can get those numbers to her and how they can be meaningful. Moving on, comic store market shares. So again, going back to what do I have to do? Oh, I got to push this button. Sorry. It's been a month since I've used StreamYard. I forgot how to use all the tools.
Meanwhile,
it's been a month. So yeah, there were the overall market share data came out through ICV2. ICV2, if you're a comic shop and you're not paying for their pro channel, which I think is like $20 a year, like it's very inexpensive. Definitely should be, because I feel like just for the work they do on sales data, it's well worth it. I've talked to Milton, and I'd like to get him some numbers as well. So we're definitely going to try and figure out how to get more information, because if you could increase this from the 100 to 150 stores that Comic Hub has, and then so it says here there were over 100 stores using Comic Hub system. Right now we have 120 using 2.0 and another 60 or so using Classic. So we can augment that data, or we can just, give them our own data and they can figure out how to slice and dice it. But yeah, for sure. I think anything like together, we would have a good 10% of the market covered. And we've got aggressive plans to get to 300 stores this year, and, keep on growing from there. So we can definitely provide some good numbers. And it's always interesting to see, Marvel's at 34%, DC's 27%, Image and Boom. Dark Horse is really kind of moving up, I feel, and they've done a lot of things like the Kevin Smith line, and they've got Scott Snyder doing what's that called? We Have Demons or something like that, or We Are Demons, or have you read that, Ivan?
I've not. It popped up on my radar, and then I've been so busy that.
That's right in your wheelhouse, man.
It is. No, it absolutely is.
Greg
there's a few things
Demons
that I need to catch up on.
Yeah, so these are interesting, and we'll include this in our show notes so that you can go and check out the ICV2 comic market shares. So speaking of comics, are you reading anything interesting lately?
Well, due to a beat article, I ended up reading Face. I was just telling you about that earlier today.
Oh, yeah.
By Peter Milligan and Duncan Fegredo. Man, the classic Vertigo stuff from the 90s. I forgot how good it was and how good the covers were.
They're
the
like
cover art of the early Vertigo stuff was so amazing.
Yeah, for sure. They were the Hellblazer team, right?
Man, you're embarrassing me now. You're calling me out. I know they did Enigma, which I was not a reader of. I just found out about it on that list, so it's going to be something I might look into. Yeah, there's just so many great books. I didn't buy a lot in the mid to late 90s because I was a poor college student. I read a few issues of my buddy's Preacher, and I remember like one issue in particular stuck with me to the point where, like 7 years later, I bought the entire trade collection within about a month.
That's awesome.
Or I would get one, I'd read it, and the next day I'd buy volume 2 and then volume 3. I couldn't. Yeah, it was the pre Netflix binging type of thing.
That's
and
awesome.
It was amazing and beautiful. I loved it.
I'm trying to remember what I'm reading right now that I'm actually really enjoying. There's Nightwing. Every month is amazing.
I've said first superhero comic book I've subscribed to in over 20 years.
Do a Power Bomb just wrapped up, and I've only read the first 2 issues, but I've got all 7. I just gotta get through and read them. 8 Billion Genies, which I love. I read that every month when it comes out. Like literally, that's the thing that inspires me to go to the comic store every time an issue comes out. And I get my email through Managed Comics that says my issue has arrived at LA Moods. So I hop in my car and go for a Starbucks run. I just got, and you can see them right behind me, right there. I got the second volume of Who's Who, which is like my favorite DC thing from the 80s. And then the Grant Morrison Multiversity, Absolute Multiversity came out. And I picked up my copy in Toronto from my buddy Pete. Man, I love that series. That's one of my favorite comics of all time. And Jeff at the Comics Place keeps on threatening to do a podcast about multiversity and you know the breakdown. Grant Morrison has his Substack newsletter. I forget what it's called, but he does annotations of the multiversity issues. They're so great.
Well, I figure we haven't done this for over a month. One thing I did recently read was Friday by Ed Brubaker, and I gotta say it is painful that it's released once a year in December. And
oh yeah,
you have to wait an entire year for the and the first one, and there's only been 2 so far. So, but they drop with this cliffhanger, like old serial Flash Gordon cliffhanger. Oh my god, I gotta wait 12 months to read it in like 30 minutes, and then it's an entire year. But and it went in a completely direction I was not expecting at all, which made it all the better. And I can't say anything about it because I don't want to run it, but it's pretty cool. You got this kind of Encyclopedia Brown character trying to solve a mystery, and his pal. And I like I said, you should look into it. It's really, really, really good, and it's painful that they make you wait as long as they do.
That's good stuff. Hey, let's real quick, because we're kind of running long. I wanted to try and keep these around 30 minutes, and we're just a little bit over, but just wanted to talk really briefly about what's coming up for Managed Comics. So I've got to update the roadmap because it's so far out of date now. But yeah, I've been kind of maintaining things with Taras in the background. We've got a initial
You
order.
knocked a lot of stuff out too in the last just little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've got an initial order thing that I keep on kind of pulling off because we got it really, really far. And then what we found was there's a lot of things that Shopify won't allow us to do. So we are still figuring out exactly how we're going to get the data in that we need. But in the meantime, we did a whole bunch of kind of quality of life things. So things like making sure that multiple distributions don't break when something is not offered again. Unapproved items that were showing up in lists, even though they're not approved, so they're not getting pulled. So that was confusing people. Printing out customer lists and printing out the pull lists. So I actually created print styles for both those things. There was an error. Sometimes when you turn something from pulled state to build, it gives an error. So we went and fixed that. And actually, I apparently have the new resolution to QA right now. And then we're working on a whole bunch of little things around FOCs and improving some of that data challenges that we talked about. We've got a whole project to do our own version of series codes so that we can map those against the existing series codes and make sure everything makes sense.
So when the publisher decides midway through to change the publisher code for a title?
Yeah, exactly. Then we can just append it to the existing series code. Yeah, because there. Well, I mean, honestly, what brought this about was DC's one shots. They keep on using different series codes to identify the one shot. So, what was it called? The first Lazarus Pit story. No. It was Shadow War. They were using the Robin series code for.
Yeah.
Because internally DC has family codes, and Lunar has been using those family codes to create series codes. So we have our own way of creating our own series codes from now on, which will mean we'll be able to tie all of the one shots together. Because right now we can't do that, and you'll notice that one shots have like their own grouping of ridiculousness. So yeah, we're going to get all that stuff sorted out really soon. Yeah, it's a lot of data stuff that we're working on, and then that stuff will flow right through to the front end. But by the end of this week, I'll have our roadmap updated. Taras and I are getting together for a full day on Thursday, and we're going to basically map out our next couple months worth of projects. We've got a full-time developer and a full-time special projects person working now, so things are going to happen a lot faster. And it's actually, I'm scrambling to kind of keep stories fully spec'd out so that our developer can work on the actual project. So, I mean, that's a good story. Yeah, so next time we talk, it'll be new catalogs. So we'll definitely go through the catalogs and talk about what is interesting in them. Well, I'm sure we'll come up with 1,000 data issues that we can't had. There's been a few like 2023 kind of year in preview stories, and I'd love to talk about those. There was a really good article with James Tinian at sketch.com, and they did a really good article on where comics are possibly going in 2023. So I'd love to talk about those next time we get together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But in the meantime, and in between times, keep selling comics. And we will talk to you in 1 week's time.
Or sooner.
There you go. All right, folks. That is Meanwhile with Managed Comics, episode 1.
Meanwhile at Managed Comics, coming to you from a secret underground lair, these dedicated heroes discuss the business of comics, industry news, comic book retail issues, and the latest developments from Managed Comics. They are promoters of comics, champions of small business, and four-color heroes. They are the Managed Comics team.